In this video, Jordan Peterson talks about the proper response to the suffering of life, and he also explains the consequences of not taking responsibility.
Which is to say that there are no more individuals, but only specimens. But eternity, which arches over and high above the temporal, tranquil as the starry vault at night, and God in heaven, who in the bliss of that sublime tranquility holds in survey, without the least sense of dizziness at such a height, those countless multitudes of men, and knows each single individual by name. He, the great examiner, says that only one attains the goal. Kierkegaard was a Christian existentialist, Protestant. Dostoevsky was an Orthodox Christian existentialist, and Nietzsche, who was also an existentialist, was perhaps the most effective anti-Christian philosopher who's ever existed. And he made it one of his conscious aims to take a hammer to everything that was foundational against what was left at Christianity at the time that he existed. And the reason I'm telling you this is because existentialism is a strange philosophical, it's a strange philosophy. It brings people with very divergent fundamental assumptions together. They share certain assumptions. And one assumption is that life in its essence is suffering. And the second is that the individual has a responsibility to adopt responsibility in the face of that suffering, and that's the proper response. The proper response isn't nihilism or ideological possession. It's something else. It's something that depends on the person themselves. Nietzsche draws the same conclusions as Kierkegaard. A traveler who had seen many countries and peoples and several continents was asked what human traits he had found everywhere. And he answered, "Men are inclined to laziness." Some will feel that he might have said with greater justice, "They're all timid. They hide behind customs and opinions." At bottom, every human being knows very well that he is in this world just once as something unique, and that no accident, however strange, will throw together a second time into a unity such a curious and diffuse plurality. He knows it, but hides it like a bad conscience. Why? The last lecture, when we were talking about Rogers, not the video lecture, but the last time I was talking to you about Rogers, I was talking about instrumental speech, and that's the speech that you engage in. It's inauthentic from a Rogerian existentialist perspective when the goal of this speech is to extract something from someone or something. The goal is not mere clarity of communication. And so what that means is that the speech becomes separate from the person, and the speech is being used as a tool for what some element of the person requires. And that's the hiding behind convention that Nietzsche is talking about. Because when people use instrumental speech, they're almost always pursuing something that other people have told them that they should want. It might be status, it might be career promotion, it might be, well, those are two of the major, it might be material progress of other sorts. But the problem is that it's only part of the person talking. And that part is the part that's fixated on that local achievement. It's not the part that is attempting to inquire about what the truth might be in this particular situation and to describe it as carefully as possible. And that's the clearest speech of the individual. Now, one of the premises of existential psychotherapy is that that's the only way you can be healthy. You have to learn to speak and act as a whole, and you have to be directed towards responsibility and truth. And the consequences of not doing that will be, A, that you will suffer pointlessly, which is the worst kind of suffering, and B, which is worse, you'll bring rack and ruin onto everyone around you. And it gets worse than that, actually, because if you do that long enough, not only will you bring rack and ruin on everyone around you, you'll want to. And that seems, at least potentially, like a bad outcome. Well, you can say, if you adopt a firm belief system, that'll protect you from that. It's like the terror management idea of ideology protecting you from death anxiety, which is it's a very hopeless philosophy, that. Because it basically suggests that the only reason people have beliefs is because they're terrified without them, and that if they engage in any sort of heroic behavior, it's merely a facade that in the final analysis is empty, although necessary. That's where the idea of positive illusion came from, essentially. You know, that life is so terrible that unless you lie yourself into tranquility, you'll be mentally unstable and unhealthy. A doctrine for which, by the way, there is no real evidence. In fact, anyways. From fear of his neighbor who insists on convention and veils himself with it. But what is it that compels the individual human being to fear his neighbor, to think and act herd fashion, and not to be glad of himself? A sense of shame, perhaps, in a few rare cases. In the vast majority, it is the desire for comfort. Inertia, in short, that inclination to laziness of which the traveler spoke. He's right, men are even lazier than they are timid. And what they fear most is the troubles with which any unconditional honesty and nudity would burden them. Only artists hate this slovenly life in borrowed manners and loosely fitting opinions and unveil the secret, everyone's bad conscience, the principle that every human being is a unique wonder. They dare to show us the human being as he is, down to the last muscle, himself and himself alone. Even more, that in this rigorous consistency of his uniqueness, he is beautiful and worth contemplating, as novel and incredible as every work of nature, and by no means dull. When a great thinker despises men, it's their laziness that he despises, for it is on account of this that they have the appearance of factory products and appear indifferent and unworthy of companionship or instruction. The human being who does not wish to belong to the mass must merely cease being comfortable with himself. Let him follow his conscience, which shouts at him, "Be yourself." What you are presently doing, opining, and desiring, that is not really you.